Welcome to episode 8 of our Mindful Transition channel. I'm here with Ian Kay, who is also a certified professional coach through IPEC, as I am myself. And we welcome you today. And welcome, Ian.
Thanks, Walter. Glad to be here. I'm interested to sort of see what we come up with this week.
Yeah, this week we're going to be talking about authenticity, and we hear about authenticity. Everybody's talking about keeping it real and be your authentic self, and there's a lot of talk about the whole idea of being authentic. So I think it's a great topic to discuss.
Yeah, I really do, and it's one of those things. Is when you talk about yourself, a lot of times we lose track of really what we're talking about sometimes. And so let me sort of explain that a little bit. It's about being yourself. It's not about imitating or trying to imitate someone else in trying to find or discover yourself. It's about sort of just being you for who you are.
And what's really great about this too is that as we're talking about this, this whole idea about trying to discover yourself, I think sometimes understanding that who we're not will really help us in that quest to find out our true authentic selves. And who we're not the roles that we play. We're not the husband or the wife, brother, employee, employer, the athlete. None of these roles that we play in life is who we are. It's what we do. Who we are is what we bring to those roles. And what's really even more fascinating is that this thing that we have called our mind, even that's not who we are. That's really just a tool that we use to navigate through this thing we call life. So what's really when we put that out there, then if who you are, if what you do is not who you are, if your mind isn't who you are, then how the heck can you really know if you're being authentic?
It's a great question. So really to sort of answer that, you would almost think you would have to master yourself. And you'd really have to sort of like delve into like what does that look like and how do you do that? So there's sort of a couple ways you can sort of go about it. And one way is understanding that I'm unique, you're unique. Anyone who's listening is unique. And we all have that uniqueness to offer. And that only occurs, that uniqueness that we bring to any situation, that only occurs when we're authentic and when we're being our authentic self. So discovering what that authentic self looks like sort of is like a trial and error a lot of the time. It's like, oh, was that it? Or was that it? So, and that's natural and it's normal. It's okay to have sort of that experience. And you would expect that to happen.
Yes.
Um, so, but really at the end of the day, it's about sharing who you are with the people and the communities around you. And it's about doing it in a way that only you can.
That's a great point, and it's funny as you were talking about this. It reminds me of the title of a book by John Kabat-Zinn, and he talks. The title of the book is "Wherever You Go, There You Are," and it's really funny because it seems so simple, right? Wherever you go, there you are. Um, and when we talk about the roles that we play, is not who we are; it's what we do. Uh, who we are is what we bring to those roles, and those roles that we and all the things that we do, it's always in this arena of this thing called the now. So in the present moment, if it's funny how when you're young we think we got to go backpack through Nepal or to go find ourselves. Well, the thing is, when you really look at the title of this book, wherever you go, there you are. So we're always with ourselves. But really, when you think about some of the things we've talked about in previous weeks about the self-awareness, the inner awareness, outer awareness, the whole idea about the acceptance, the whole idea of making conscious choices, also even the concept of trust in the process. All that really leads up to the fact that uh, who we are, we know one thing for sure is that who we are is always in this present moment. And that's why one of the first things that I do with my clients is I give them that exercise of watching the thinker. That if you can become aware of your thoughts, then you can't necessarily be your thoughts, because who the heck is watching your thoughts? So I think that it's really when we um, if you really want to really understand who you are, as you can grow and being more mindful and being more present, you're going to find that you're going to have a deeper connection to yourself. And the one point that you said was this whole thing about self mastery and self mastery. And it's really part of the self mastery really comes from the 7 levels of energy that we coach. We know that when we're under stress reaction, when we're feeling like we're having to protect, defend our ego created sense of who we think we are, or our self perception, we will drop into being overwhelmed. We'll get angry. As you look around the world right now, there's a lot of people under a lot of stress reactions right now. But self mastery really comes down to the point where we get to that level 3 energy, where we take responsibility for our thoughts and our feelings. And we know that how we're showing up for the world is really our responsibility. So when we start to get to that point where we're taking responsibility for our feelings and our thoughts, we're now stepping into our authentic selves. And once we do that, then we can move on to the service, where we can now start to, once we know and start to feel who we truly are, we can start to take care of other people. We can show interest in other people. We can start to become more compassionate, more empathetic, not only with other people, but even ourselves. We can start to give ourselves a little bit of self love, right? Uh, Not equated with being selfish. And then once we do that, we can get to the point where we don't have to label and judge everything around us in order to protect a false sense of who we really are, where we can just become curious about life. Right. So Ian, as far as yourself, working with your clients, how have you been able to really connect them to their authentic self? And what are some of the things that you've done, questions you've asked, or I don't know, just tools that you've given them? How have you started to help people connect to and kind of work through that self mastery of really being more present and trying to understand uh, when they're actually being authentic and when they're not being authentic?
Um, so I guess the first like tool that I really use is the Energy Leadership Index assessment. Um, and that just sort of gives people a real like a grounded um, presence and perspective of the energy levels and how it relates to them in their life. But to get a bit more specific about the actual, like sort of defining who they are and bringing the awareness to it, um, is sort of what you sort of mentioned before, is just having them sort of look and sort of see. So I sort of like to just have them write this down, is like, because a lot of times people will sort of say like, oh, well, you know, I'm a hockey player, or I'm a football player, or I'm a basketball player, or I'm in track and field, or I'm a doctor, um, or I'm a nurse. Like it, there's so many different things, or I'm a writer. Like whatever it is a lot of times they sort of attach themselves to that. So just have them write that down. I'm like, okay, so if that's what you think you are, write it down. If I'm a husband, I'm a wife, I have a brother, I have a sister, I have a mom, I have a dad, like, and just write all those things down and just sort of be like, okay, what else is left? And it's really interesting. At the end of it, I'll ask them sort of a question based on the energy levels and get them to write down what energy level do they think each one of those things they wrote down is. And a lot of them at the end of the day have different levels of energy for each of them. And I'm trying to remember exactly what she said, but the one thing that she noticed at the end of doing it was, this makes so much sense now. Because I always thought I was a certain level of energy, or I was a certain, like, I was the same person throughout all of these different things. And she's like, and that doesn't make sense that I would be the same in all those instances. She says, but it also makes sense that that's also not who I am now. She says there's something else sort of behind that that's sort of who I am. And it's a sort of just a great way to get people to like have that awareness about it. Is like sort of one step that I sort of found. The other one is honestly, I really love the exercise in that IPEC's given us, and it just talks about your identity and sort of breaking it down into its 10 questions. And it's a really powerful exercise that really gets people to sort of think and see and feel who they are behind all of those roles and positions.
And for some of our listeners that may not be familiar with the ELI, it's the Energy Leadership Index Assessment, which is actually an attitudinal assessment. And what's fascinating about this tool is that it is ranked by a council of coaches as the number fourth assessment that a lot of executives should take in order to understand consciousness and emotional intelligence. And it's an attitudinal assessment, so it's not a personality assessment. It's how you view the world. And what's really interesting is because we understand that the 7 levels of energy that we talk about are not, they're basically 7 levels of consciousness, awareness, engagement, and confidence. And we understand that when we're at the lower level of energy, we're more likely to be in this contracting energy where we're afraid, we're worried, we're depressed, or we're angry. When we're at the highest level of consciousness, we're less likely to judge or be in fear. We're more likely to be passionate, joyful. So what's really fascinating about this is that these attitudes, the way that we perceive the world, is based on our thinking, and our thinking related to our beliefs. And beliefs are statements that we believe to be true based on past experience. So this assessment that you're talking about is a fascinating assessment. And I know that you're a master practitioner as well as myself. And that I find that you're right. When people understand that the way that they're viewing life and their level of awareness of their own lives and also understanding that their level of emotional intelligence is not really who they are. It's just how they're thinking. The big aha moment comes from people. And I think that that's where I've kind of come to after doing close to 200 of these assessments. I've understood that life is not as personal as we think it is, but we are responsible for more than we think we are. So in other words, a lot of our beliefs and values and experiences in our lives sometimes can feel like life has happened to us and we've had our parents, different people influencing us. But what's really fascinating about this is that even though life is not personal, because this is just the way we're thinking, we are responsible for how we choose to show up. Because how we show up affects everything. It affects our life experience. It affects other people's experience of us. And ultimately, what it does, it affects the world around us. Right? So our authentic self is really a lot more powerful than we really think, that even we believe it is. Because, they talk about, I think Gandhi was talking about, be the peace that you want to see in the world. Well, if every person in the world was committed to having personal peace, we would have peace in the world. The idea that, the idea that and that's why I love that ELI assessment, and it's something that I would recommend for anybody, even if you don't know whether or not coaching is something for you. just to really reach out to us. We'd be more than happy to work something out and do that. It's a paid assessment, but hey, it's well worth it. I've had a lot of people get great insights from that. But then the whole idea about it's almost like beginning with the end in mind. If you want to be authentic, go back and figure out who you're not, and go back and really, when you think about it, how much more authentic is there than a 2 or 3 year old?
There
Right?
isn't.
What were you like at 2 or 3 years old? If either you remember or your parents,
Uh,
or even 5 years old, what was your first recollection of being a kid?
so I don't have that many like strong memories from like personally, but the one that I consistently am told by my parents and aunts and cousins and nephews is I was Dennis the Menace growing up. So if there was something to do with getting in trouble, I was normally in the middle of it. If there was a muddy hill or a hill in general, I would be going down it. Um, if there was something that was sort of like an adventure, I was the one being like, let's go, come on. They don't see us right now. We can run and make it. So I was sort of that kid. I think one of the first things I remember is coming home in grade one from like first or second day of school, and like brand new jeans. I had them ripped and get grass stained, and like I just remember my mom's face. She's like, "Ian, how? Like those were brand new 2 days ago. You've worn them once. How is that possible?" Am I right? I'm like, like I played and was having fun.
Well, what's really fascinating when you think about it, right? You were curious, you were engaged, right? There was no fear, right? You didn't sweat the small stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
So really, perhaps you were being more yourself then before the whole domestication process of who we should be. And I love that there's another old saying that life isn't about finding yourself. Life is about creating yourself. Right. And I think that we already have a really solid foundation of who we are. Perhaps it's really just learning how to trust ourselves, trust the process of being ourselves, and go back to being curious, right? Trust in the process, right? Being aware of the things that really fire you up, right? Like living life from a point of view of a I want to and I get to, rather than from a I have to or need to. Right? Perhaps it's maybe like you did when you were a kid, man. You tried a lot of different things, right? And you, what were some of the things you got in trouble that you really enjoyed doing? What do you remember? What did you enjoy doing? Was it just jumping off fences? What was
All
what were
of the
some?
above. So I would climb trees and jump from the highest part of the tree that I could make it to. Um, I would go to like the highest part of the jungle gyms and jump down into the sand pits. Um, I had Tonka trucks growing up, so like I digged my way underneath our deck because it was full of sand, and had like a whole like city thing like dug out underneath our deck. Um, so like it was just sort of that, and I got in trouble for all of that. Like the one time I'll say this, I remember I was at school. My mom came to pick me up, and I was playing on the jungle gym or playground thing. I'm not sure what you want to call it. But there was like one part that was like really high, especially when you're like seven. I think it was about seven. And like my mom's like, Ian, let's go. Like I'm gonna be late. So I was like, I'm at like probably the highest part. Now, in my mom's mind, there's a slide right beside me.
Yeah,
So she would expect me to go down the slide. I turn, face her, and instantly she's like, Ian, no. Like, she just like, I just remember her like, and it wasn't just like like, it wasn't a soft note. It was like sort of her yelling it.
Yeah, it
Um,
was in the mother voice,
yes.
the mother voice, right?
And like, I just jump off right into the sand pit, right? Yeah, and like, I get up and go over to her, and she's just like, she just shakes her head, just like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, fine, let's go."
Yeah, perhaps perhaps being authentic is just really going back and connecting to that the energy, right? That try something, right? Uh, it's interesting when we talk about from the whole subconscious to conscious is that by the time we're 35, 95% of what we do, decisions we make in the moment are based on our subconscious. 5% are conscious. When you think about when we're kids, it is probably the opposite way around, right? 95% of the decisions we made were conscious decisions, right? And because again, we haven't built up this big subconscious at that. So perhaps maybe important because our subconscious stores a lot of our feeling, a lot of our memories in the form of feelings. That's why that old saying, you may forget what somebody says to you, but you'll never forget how it made you feel. And so what happens is that we get to the point where we because every time we were about to make a decision, we focus on our feelings. We'll feel something, then we'll think, create a story, create an emotion, and then we act. If we feel, think, and act enough times, according to what Joe Dispenza says, we start creating these habits, these habitual way of being. These habits create our personality, and before you know it, that is our reality. So maybe perhaps one of the things that we are is really just a bunch of habits that we've acquired over life. Right? And the idea of being authentic is perhaps I know that it's often be said that when we get inspired, we'll act. When we get inspired, we'll act quickly. People that get inspired act quickly and they figure out the how later. I think as kids, we acted and then figured out the how and the feelings later, right? So perhaps being more authentic is really just going back to that point where we don't have to know how everything's going to work out, but just really trust our intuition, our gut, our that part of us that really is just dying to come out into the present moment.
Yeah, and it's interesting. The word that comes up for me when you're talking about this is like to be in, is like to almost uh, to be an investigator, is to really sort of be like, it's sort of like beyond curious. So it's actually being intentional in your in curiosity, is being like, it like, is this authentic to me? How does this feel? Is this me? And it's sort of like what you're sort of saying. In those moments, it's trusting yourself, and it's trusting yourself to know the answer. And it's
Yeah.
not about like, is this someone else that I've been trying to be for the past 5 years, or is this, the actions someone else has been taking for the past 5 years, and you're trying to like replicate those. It's about being you, and really just being curious and really investigating what's true for you, what's authentic for you, at the end of the day.
And that's why understanding that our truth may not be the truth, but it's our. And one thing about our bodies, we have some really built-in BS detectors. We know when something doesn't feel right. And really, when you look at hindsight, quite often, because we talk about this holographic thinking, what's logic? What's a reasonable thing to do here? How do I feel about it? What's my gut telling me? Quite often, when we go back and look at something that we would do different, it's because we didn't really listen to our intuition, our knowingness. And really, when we were more authentic ourselves when we were kids before the domestication process, we really trusted our gut feeling. And I think that part of that is what's actually happened is we've learned this thing called fear. And with fear, we stop trusting ourselves. So, which is going to lead us up to next week. Next week, we're going to discuss confidence. And what is confidence? Because really, in order to be our authentic selves, yes, we need to have inner and outer awareness. Yes, we need to learn how to accept things about ourselves, others, and situations. We need to also consider how to make conscious choices, then trust the process, then really just really not only trusting the process but trusting ourselves. Are we truly being our authentic selves? How does this feel? Am I living up to the most important highest values for myself, right? And then having the confidence to do all that. So next week we're going to be able to touch on that. And I really love some of those stories with you as a kid, the Menace. And it's funny because you look like a grown up Dennis the Menace, not in a bad way, right? But you got the wonderful hair. But I really think that really it's really more really about remembering who we really are, rather than trying to be something that we're not. And if we're going to create ourselves, we already have a solid foundation, right? Because the one thing that I always tell people is that at the essence of who we are, we're not broken. We don't need to be fixed. But since we're not the role mind, I think that sometimes as people, we just need some insight, some tools to get that dawning comprehension of what really being ourselves really means. And I think that next week, I'm really looking forward to discussing confidence. And Ian, I thank you for sharing these stories of you as a young Dennis the Menace. And I look forward to next week and the things that we'll chat about next week.